On December 26, 1943, at 6:15 a.m., Captain Shogo Takuchi stood next to Kawasaki Ki-61 aircraft number 263 on Cape Gloucester airfield in New Britain, looking at an engine that wouldn't start. This plane had been his personal fighter for 8 months. Two white bands painted along the fuselage identified it as belonging to the 2nd Shutai commander. An eagle emblem adorned the left side of the cockpit, while 4 red stars marked each winggun port. The aircraft had accompanied him on numerous combat missions over New Guinea. However, this morning, its Kawasaki HR-40 engine refused to ignite. Takuchi was 25 years old, and the 2nd Shutai commander in the 68th Sentai with 19 confirmed aerial victories. He started flying K-61s in April when his unit switched from Nakajima Ki-27 fighters. The 68th Sentai became the first Imperial Japanese Army Air Force unit to receive these new fighter aircraft. They deployed to Wawak, New Guinea, in June and subsequently relocated their operations to various airfields throughout the region as the conflict escalated. Cape Gloucester Airfield was situated on the northwestern tip of New Britain, approximately 230 miles west of Rabaul, serving as a forward operating base for Japanese fighters, tasked with defending against American bomber attacks. By late December, however, the tactical situation had deteriorated significantly. Allied forces were preparing to invade Cape Gloucester. Intelligence indicated that Marine divisions were gathering for an amphibious assault. Takuchi's K-61 was not in serviceable condition. Its HR-40 engine had been experiencing issues for several weeks, with excessive oil consumption being a persistent problem. Temperatures in the cylinder heads remained elevated even when the engine was idling. The day before, during a routine patrol mission, the aircraft's engine started to misfire at high altitudes. Takuchi made an emergency landing and informed the ground crew about the malfunction. They inspected spark plugs, adjusted valve clearances, and tested magnetos without finding any obvious faults. When they tried restarting the engine just before dawn, it refused to start despite adequate cranking by the starter motor and proper propeller rotation, indicating sufficient compression. The issue seemed to lie either with a complete failure of the ignition system or an interruption in fuel delivery to the cylinders. Due to a lack of appropriate tools and spare parts, the mechanics were unable to effect repairs on site. At 0620 hours, Teach made his decision he would fly another aircraft back to Rabaul. Key number 61, corresponding to manufacturer serial number 263, would be left behind. The ground crew attempted to conceal it near the runway in case retrieval might become feasible later, but realistically everyone understood that once the Americans landed, the aircraft was likely to fall into enemy hands. At 0700 hours, Takuchi took off in a different Ki-61 and headed for Rabaul while mechanics rolled manufacturer number 263 into a grove of palm trees at the edge of the airfield. They covered it with chopped plant material and then evacuated with the remaining ground crew. For 4 days, the aircraft remained concealed at Cape Gloucester. On December 30th, United States Marines from the 1st Marine Division seized the airfield as part of Operation Backhander's initial phase. That same afternoon, a patrol uncovered the camouflaged Ki-61. The plane was undamaged and intact. The fuselage markings were visible beneath the foliage, with an eagle emblem on the cockpit, clearly identifying it as a command aircraft. It featured a fully assembled engine, unscathed instruments and operational armament, two 12.7 mm Ho-193 machine guns in the forward fuselage, and two 7.7 mm Type 89 machine guns mounted on the wings. The aircraft was identified as a Type 61-1, the earliest production model, built at Kawasaki's Kagamaigahara factory in April 1943, with construction number 263. Was uncoded when discovered, and the Marines promptly informed the Technical Air Intelligence Unit TU. On January 2, 1944, TU personnel traveled to Cape Gloucester. They meticulously documented every aspect of the aircraft, recording precise measurements, snapping photographs from all angles, and conducting thorough examinations of its systems. This particular Ki-61 was the first intact example captured by Allied forces. For 18 months, American pilots had engaged with this aircraft over New Guinea, referring to it as Tony. Initial intelligence reports speculated that it could be a German Messerschmitt Bf-9 or an Italian Macchi C-202 adorned with Japanese markings. However, technical analysis finally clarified its true identity. It turned out that the Ki-61 was entirely of Japanese design. The engine was a Kawasaki R40, manufactured under license from the German Daimler-Benz DB61. Nonetheless, the airframe itself represented original engineering work by Kawasaki. The fuselage featured a narrow yet deep semi-triangular cross-section. Its wings were notably small for a fighter of its weight, leading to high wing loading. Fixed slots in the wing's leading edges accommodated conventional landing gear. The cooling system incorporated wing-mounted radiators, an uncommon feature for Japanese fighters that usually utilized radial engines. Pilots noted that the Tony could outdive any other Japanese fighter. It maintained high speeds during level flight and was more resilient to damage compared to lighter Zero models, albeit with reduced maneuverability due to tighter turns being a disadvantage. The aircraft's design explained this trade-off. High wing loading increased stall speed and required larger turning radii. Additionally, the liquid-cooled engine was heavier than equivalent radial engines, moving the center of gravity forward. These characteristics contributed to an airplane optimized for speed and firepower rather than agility. On March 1, 1944, a captured Ki-61 was transported to Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane Ace Fighters. Technical Intelligence Unit. Technicians worked on making the engine operational after discovering that a failed magneto had grounded it at Cape Gloucester. Once replaced, the HAHA test flights followed, with American pilots comparing its performance against other captured Japanese fighters. Extensive test flights followed, with American pilots comparing its performance against other captured Japanese fighters. Information's Communist is tracing the Ki-61 demonstrated superior speed in level flight and diving compared to the Zero, boasting better acceleration as well. The weaponry was both more substantial and more efficient, yet when it came to sustained turning engagements, the Zero proved superior. American aviators noted that piloting the Ki-61 demanded meticulous energy management. Its fort lay in swooping attacks from higher altitudes. Thanks to its speed advantage, it could escape pursuing aircraft, but once engaged in low-speed turning battles, it became susceptible to attack. The attributes aligned with combat reports from serial number 263 surpassed the technical information it contained. It offered a glimpse into Japanese fighter capability. The state of the airframe shed light on maintenance procedures and supply limitations. Signs of wear on the engine pointed to quality control issues during production. Markings on the aircraft revealed unit organization and command hierarchies. Every aspect contributed to an overall intelligence assessment. In May 1944, the Ki-61 was stripped of its Japanese insignia and repainted in American markings. The gathered data shaped training programs and tactical doctrines throughout the Pacific Theater. In June 1944, TIU received instructions to transport the aircraft back to the United States. Disassembled and shipped to Naval Air Station Anacostia near Washington, D.C., it was reassembled for additional testing. By December 1944, the plane had been repainted with pseudo-Japanese markings and tested against American naval fighters such as the F-6F Hellcat, F-4U Corsair, and others to determine comparative performance metrics. The tests demonstrated that U.S. time. Naval fighters generally outperformed their Japanese counterparts in various combat situations. Specifically, the F-6F had superior turning capabilities and excelled at high altitudes compared to the Ki-61. Meanwhile, the F-4U was faster across all altitude ranges and could outclimb the Tony. Both American aircraft also boasted better acceleration and more potent armament. Examination of the oil system revealed metal debris. suggesting bearing deterioration, a problem that had affected the HAR-40 engine throughout its operational history. The aircraft abandoned by Captain Shogo Takuchi at Cape Gloucester some 18 months prior was subsequently destroyed. Although the wreckage was declared a total loss, the intelligence gleaned from it had already fulfilled its purpose. Information gathered from test flight number 263 significantly enhanced American comprehension of Japanese fighter design and capabilities during a pivotal phase of the Pacific War. Captain Takuchi never discovered what happened to his abandoned aircraft. He returned to Rabaul on December 26 for more combat missions. On December 21, 1943, 5 days before abandoning his Ki-61 at Cape Gloucester, Captain Takuchi took off from Borum Airfield near Wake on an escort mission. His unit was tasked with protecting a formation of 48 light bombers targeting American positions in Arway. The mission faced intense fighter opposition, and the group encountered P-38 Lightnings dispatched by American forces. During this engagement, Takuchi's Ki-61 sustained multiple hits and eventually caught fire. Takuchi did not abandon his mission. Instead, his plane crashed into the jungle close to Hansa Bay. At just 25 years old, he had racked up an impressive tally of 19 confirmed victories and was recognized as one of the top 6-1 pilots in the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force. His remains were never found. Operations continued for the 68th Sentai in New Guinea until early 1944, when they faced a relentless American air superiority that proved impossible to overcome. As time wore on, issues such as engine malfunctions, scarcity of spare parts, insufficient maintenance facilities, and continuous combat losses gradually weakened their numbers. Surviving members were either transferred to other units or redeployed to ground combat roles as the Japanese foothold in New Guinea disintegrated entirely. Lieutenant Mitsuyoshi Tui was another pilot from the 68th Sentai who achieved notable success flying the Ki-61 fighter. Along with Takeuchi, he was regarded as one of the top 2 Tony pilots within the unit. Both began their combat careers piloting the agile Ki-10Z before encountering difficulties adjusting to the heavier and less maneuverable Ki-61. However, they eventually learned to leverage the strengths of the Tony in terms of speed and firepower. Tui outlived Takeuchi, continuing his tenure with the Ki-61 after the withdrawal of the 68th Sentai from New Guinea. He subsequently participated in the Philippines campaign, where he amassed a total of 23 confirmed kills, placing him among the most successful Ki-61 pilots throughout the war. The combat performance of the 68th Sentai highlighted both the capabilities and challenges associated with operating the Ki-61 aircraft under wartime conditions. When properly maintained and flown by experienced aviators familiar with its unique characteristics, the Tony could hold its own against American fighters on equal footing. However, consistent upkeep was essential for optimal performance. The HR-40 engine frequently malfunctioned and broke down easily. Additionally, spare parts were hard to come by, and there was a shortage of properly trained mechanics. These logistical issues hindered the Ki-69's effectiveness more than any tactical shortcomings. By late 1943, when aircraft number 2063 was left abandoned at Cape Gloucester, Japan's position in the Pacific War had decidedly shifted against them. American industrial output was overwhelming Japanese capabilities to replace losses, and superior aircraft were increasingly entering service on the Allied side. The attrition rate of experienced Japanese pilots outpaced their training programs. Although once regarded as a modern and capable fighter, the Ki-61 was rapidly becoming obsolete. However, it still had one final role to fulfill when American B-29 Superfortress bombers began targeting the Japanese home islands in late 1944. Among Japanese fighters, the Ki-61 stood out for its ability to intercept these bombers at high altitudes. In April 1942, the 224th Sentai was established specifically to defend Tokyo from aerial threats. Based at Chovu Air Base west of the capital, this unit's primary mission was to intercept enemy bombers attacking the city. Initially equipped with outdated K-27 fighters, the unit received its first Ki-9s in early 1944. By October, it had around 40 Ki-61 aircraft and had undergone extensive training aimed at countering B-29 raids. The B-29 posed a unique challenge for Japanese fighters due to its ability to fly at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet. its heavy defensive armament of remote-controlled turrets, and its capacity to sustain significant damage while remaining operational. Traditional fighter tactics often fail to achieve desired results against this formidable aircraft. The Ki-61 was among a rare group of Japanese fighters capable of reaching the operational altitudes of B-29 bombers with enough performance margin for effective combat. However, even at such extreme heights, shooting down a B-29 required exceptional skill and often entailed suicidal bravery. On November 7, 1944, the commanding officer of the 10th Air Division issued an order that dramatically altered aerial warfare over Japan. He sanctioned the creation of specialized ramming attack units. These pilots would intentionally crash their aircraft into B-29s to destroy both planes. While these missions were not strictly kamikaze operations, they still demanded significant courage and precision. Pilots were instructed to aim for the bomber's tail or wingtip to sever control surfaces before ejecting from their own rapidly disintegrating fighter. This unit comprised volunteers from its 3 squadrons. First Lieutenant Toru Shinomiya was chosen to lead this dangerous mission. At 24 years old and with extensive combat experience, he understood the likely fatal outcome but accepted the assignment without hesitation. On December 3, 1944, a formation of B-29s approached Tokyo. The 24th 4th Sentai dispatched all available fighters to intercept them. Shinomiya led the Hagakure Tai toward the bombers at maximum climb rate. The Ki-61s had been stripped of their fuselage armament and armor plate to enhance high-altitude performance, carrying only minimal fuel and ammunition for the wing guns. Every resource was dedicated to maximizing altitude capability. At 32,000 feet, Shinomiya positioned his key aircraft, the Ki-61, above and behind a B-29 bomber from the distant 49th Bombardment Group. He then dove toward the bomber, targeting its vertical stabilizer. The collision severed the stabilizer completely, causing the bomber to go into an uncontrollable spin. Shinomiya's Ki-61 suffered significant damage to its left outer wing panel and began rolling violently. He struggled valiantly to regain control, managing to slow the aircraft and decrease altitude. By 12,000 feet, he had managed to stabilize the crippled fighter in a near-level position. He then ejected his canopy and parachuted safely from the plane. His parachute deployed successfully, and he landed in a rice field near Chofu Air Base. But his aircraft was 2 sever pilots from the Hagakure Tai also performed ramming attacks. Sergeant Masa Itaki collided with another. He ejected successfully and floated to safety. Sergeant Matsumi Nano rammed yet another bomber and landed his severely damaged Ki-61 in an open field, managing to survive despite the extensive damage to his aircraft. All 3 pilots emerged from their respective missions alive. On December 3, 1944, Japan celebrated ramming attacks that caused significant damage to Ki-61's aircraft. These damaged planes were showcased in Tokyo, with one of Shinomiya's severely damaged aircraft, missing most of its left wing, being displayed inside the Matsuya department store. Meanwhile, Nano's wrecked fighter was exhibited outdoors. A life-size cutaway drawing of a B-29 fuselage was placed beside these exhibits to highlight the pilot's target. The 3 pilots involved became the first recipients of the Bukasho Award, which Emperor Hirohito established on December 7, 1944, to honor extraordinary bravery in combat. The success of the December 3 attacks spurred the 204th 4th Century to continue employing this tactic. Throughout December 1944 and into early 1945, the unit executed numerous ramming attacks against B-29 formations. According to their claims, they destroyed 73 B-29s and damaged another 92 aircraft. While these numbers were likely exaggerated, similar to most air combat claims during World War II, it is clear that the 244th Century inflicted considerable damage on American bomber squadrons. At just 24 years old, He became the youngest Senti commander in the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force. Prior to his fighter role, Kobayashi served as a bomber pilot during the Battle of Hong Kong in December 1941. In November 1943, he switched to fighters and completed training at the Ano Army Air Service School. Despite his relative lack of experience with fighter planes, Kobayashi demonstrated exceptional leadership qualities. He flew alongside his pilots instead of directing from the ground, leading by example. His personal bravery and aggressive tactics earned him the intense loyalty of those under his command. Kobayashi personally carried out at least one ramming attack on January 27, 1945, when he intentionally collided with a B-29 while piloting Case-1 serial number 319 fighter. The collision caused severe damage to the bomber's vertical stabilizer and left Kobayashi's aircraft severely damaged, losing large parts of its wings. He managed to parachute safely to the ground after ejecting from his plane. Despite this incident, he returned to combat flying a different aircraft the following day. His official victory tally stood at 3 B-29s and 2 F-6F Hellcats destroyed. Other pilots in the 244th century achieved even higher scores. Captain Nagaw Shirai was credited with destroying 11 B-29s, 2 F-6Fs, and damaging 6 other aircraft, earning him recognition as the top B-29 killer within the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force. Captain Shuichi Aikawa destroyed 9 B-29s and 1 F-6F, while also damaging 6 additional B-29 bombers. First Lieutenant Tu Shinomiya, who led the ramming attack squadron, survived numerous combat missions until he was killed in action during the battle for Okinawa as a Tokutai pilot, carrying out a conventional kamikaze mission against American naval forces. The 204th century continued using K-61 aircraft through early spring of 1945. In April, the unit began transitioning to the newer Ki-100 fighter model, an improved version of the Tony that addressed issues with the problematic HAR-40 engine by replacing it with a more reliable Mitsubishi HAR-11-2 radial engine. The K-100 was considered superior to its predecessor in most aspects. On July 25, Major Kobayashi and his pilots took off in their Ki-100s from Yokkaichi Airfield to engage incoming F-6F Hellcats, despite orders to remain on the ground. The unit had been instructed to wait for incoming bombers, but ignored this directive and instead engaged the American fighters at very low altitude. The engagement turned into a chaotic aerial melee near hangar height. 2 Japanese fighters were also lost in the battle. Despite this, Japanese media hailed the encounter as a victory. However, Kobayashi faced potential court-martial for disobeying orders during the engagement. The charges he faced were severe and could have led to harsh penalties. Yet when Emperor Hirohito learned of Kobayashi's actions, he expressed his approval, prompting an immediate dismissal of the proceedings. Major Kobayashi survived the war and went on to work in civilian industries until 1954, at which point he joined the newly established Japan Air Self-Defense Force as a fighter pilot flying Fa-6 Sabres. He traveled to the United States for half a year, in both 1955 and 1955 and 1955 and 1955, and 1956 to receive training on jet aircraft operations. The combat performance of the 244th Sentai highlighted what Japanese pilots could achieve even during the war's final desperate stages. Operating under exceedingly difficult circumstances, they struggled with a severe lack of fuel and spare parts. Replacement aircraft were scarce or non-existent, and trained pilots became increasingly rare as well. Despite this, the unit maintained its effectiveness until the very end. As executed by the Haga Kortai exemplified both the bravery and the desperation inherent in Japan's aerial defense efforts. These attacks were not senseless acts of suicide but rather carefully considered tactical choices made by experienced pilots who understood their aircraft's capabilities and constraints. The Ki-61, after shedding unnecessary weight, could just manage to reach the altitude of B-29 bombers. However, conventional air-to-air combat was frequently ineffective due to the fighter's limited maneuverability at that height. Ramming attacks proved successful where gun attacks failed, but the cost was staggering. Surviving a ramming attack meant facing the likelihood of conducting more until either death or severe injury prevented further missions. These pilots were essentially considered dead men from their first sortie onwards. The psychological strain was immense. Many embraced their fate with stoic acceptance, while others found meaning in their sacrifices. Still, some simply carried out their duties because there were no other viable alternatives. The deployment of ramming tactics underscored the extent to which Japan's strategic situation had deteriorated by late 1944. No nation resorts to such methods unless every better option has been depleted. The appearance of B-29 bombers over Japanese territory in November 1944 signified the commencement of the final phase. With American heavy bombers now able to reach the home islands from bases on the Mariana Islands, the bombing campaign would intensify throughout 1945. Japan's air defenses would gradually succumb, leading to widespread destruction and fires across its cities. Meanwhile, Japanese fighter pilots flying outdated aircraft such as the Ki-61 would continue to engage in a futile battle. The Kawasaki Ki-61 Heian was never regarded as one of the finest fighters during World War II. It lacked maneuverability compared to the Zero and could not match the speed of later American planes. Additionally, it did not possess the same level of armament as German aircraft. Throughout its operational history, it struggled with persistent engine issues that severely impacted its performance. However, the Ki-61 symbolized Japan's effort to develop a fighter capable of rivaling Allied aircraft on equal footing. Its design included self-sealing fuel tanks, which were absent in earlier Japanese fighters. It also featured pilot armor and carried heavy armament by Japanese standards. Despite being fast, it could withstand significant damage that would typically cripple lighter planes. In the hands of skilled pilots like Captain Shogo Takuchi, Lieutenant Mitsuyoshi Tarui, and Major Taruhiko Kobayashi, the Ki-61 demonstrated its lethal capabilities when used effectively. These airmen capitalized on the aircraft's strengths while mitigating its limitations. Their success in achieving high victory counts underscored the Tony's potential under optimal conditions. Yet, individual prowess alone could not rectify broader issues. Japan's industrial capacity was insufficient to manufacture enough Ki-61s to meet requirements. Furthermore, the Kawasaki HAR-40 engine experienced chronic reliability problems that remained unresolved throughout its service life. The disruption of logistics and supply chains due to relentless Allied strikes exacerbated these challenges. Training programs failed to replenish pilot losses in a timely manner. By mid-1945, Japanese air power had been virtually obliterated. The tale of the Ki-61 encapsulates the broader narrative of Japan's aerial conflict. Early triumphs were followed by attrition and ultimate defeat. The plane's technological prowess was compromised by industrial constraints. Pilot expertise diminished due to unsustainable losses. Innovative tactics could not overcome strategic overextension. Captain Shogo abandoned his aircraft, number 263, at Cape Gloucester in December 1943, symbolizing the larger struggle. Eventually destroyed due to engine issues that plagued it throughout its service life, it began and ended as a victim of technical shortcomings unresolved by Japanese industry. Today, only a few Ki-61s remain, with several on display in museums across Japan and the United States. None are currently airworthy. Mechanics and ground crews dedicated to keeping the troublesome engines operational are now historical figures, yet their accomplishments endure. Captain Tichi's 19 victories, Lieutenant Tui's 23 confirmed kills, Major Kobayashi's 3 B-29s destroyed, and his leadership of Japan's most renowned home defense unit, the 244th Cent, credited with 73 B-29 claims and 9 Bukusho awards, reflect the skill, bravery, and sacrifice of pilots facing insurmountable odds. The Kawasaki Ki-61 was Japan's attempt to address an insurmountable challenge: how to overcome an adversary with overwhelming industrial might, technological superiority, and abundant strategic resources. Though well-conceived and competently manufactured, the Ki-61 also relied on the bravery and skill of its pilots. However, these attributes alone were insufficient in reversing the course of the Pacific War, which was determined by factors far beyond the capabilities of a single aircraft model. Despite this, the pilots who flew the Ki-61 deserve recognition for their valor and dedication. They fought under a regime that history has harshly judged due to its reprehensible actions. Yet these individuals were also human beings who exhibited extraordinary courage in combat, facing death repeatedly without hesitation. Even when defeat was inevitable, they persisted with unwavering resolve. Their story is intricate and complex, defying simplistic categorization as either heroes or villains. It necessitates a nuanced understanding of the technical proficiency they demonstrated alongside the morally dubious context within which it occurred. Nevertheless, their tale warrants recounting. While not the premier fighter aircraft of the conflict, the Ki-61 distinguished itself through its capabilities amidst impossible conditions, earning a place in history for its service under such challenging circumstances. This wasn't meant as a decisive weapon in the war, but rather as a powerful tool when used correctly. It was not intended to showcase Japan's aerial dominance, but instead to highlight what Japanese engineers and pilots could achieve despite their nation's deteriorating strategic situation. If you found this narrative as captivating as we did, our community extends across the globe, uniting veterans and history enthusiasts alike in a shared appreciation for these untold stories.